Hey, sports fans, Larry Eater here. This is the Journey to Compete, a collaboration between Nike Running and RunBlogRun. Today, we're interviewing Juli Benson, who is a Nike elite coach. She also was a Olympian. I was fortunate enough to watch her race at the Olympic trials as well as the Olympics. Julie, great to see you.
Very nice to see you. Thank you for having me.
So, I'm going to start with some basic questions. How did you get involved in running?
I was really lucky. I grew up in a military family, so moved quite a bit, and just very fortunately, the various stops along the way when I was growing up had some youth running programs. So I was able to run, competitively starting in like third grade. I did a
Wow.
multitude of sports,
Mhm.
but there was always some sort of avenue in which to run. And very much saw myself as a sprinter, and my sole motivation was to beat all the boys. So yeah, kind of did that through seventh grade, and then kind of pivoted a little bit more to some other sports, and then started running more full time in high school.
Now, where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school up right outside of Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia, W2 Woodson in Fairfax.
What branch of the military were your parents in?
My dad is a retired Marine colonel.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah, and so is
Well,
my brother. So,
oh,
yeah.
neat. Awesome.
hmm
Awesome. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
very
very
cool.
proud of them.
Oh, you should be. Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Hmm.
The did you like moving around as a kid?
Well, I'm the youngest by quite a bit actually. So I didn't have to move as much as my siblings did, and they definitely took the brunt of it because I believe both of them had to move in between junior and senior year of high school, which is
Oh
brutal.
man. Oh yeah.
But I was really lucky. I didn't move quite as bit, and I didn't move quite as much, and I was able to go to high school at one place. But looking back, I really do appreciate having to pivot and kind of navigate new friend groups and new situations, new geography. And now, funny enough, I find myself getting really restless. If I stay somewhere, more than 4 or 5 years, I'm like, I need to move. But yeah, overall, I think it was actually an awesome experience.
What was your experience in high school like with cross country and track?
Oh gosh, cross country. Cross country. Don't forget to this day I still consider myself a 400-meter runner.
Okay.
And I consider the 1500 ultra long distance.
All right.
But
Respect.
no kidding. My coaches were actually pretty creative and were kind to find where I was going to sort of have a bigger impact. And at that time in Northern Virginia, it was completely loaded and extremely deep in track and field. I'm the same era as Alan Johnson, and he went to Lake Braddock, which is a rival high school. And,
Uh-huh.
I vividly remember running, our coaches had these tryouts and time trials and stuff. And I, ran, I think I broke 60 in the 400 as a freshman. And
Wow,
it was
that's
just
cool.
not even, everyone was kind of shrugged their shoulders because we had, schools that were breaking 350 in the 4x4. Like Braddock ran 342. So it was
Wow.
kind of like, well, yeah, you have to break 60. It was sort of not even a big deal. But I think, that was really great for my development because I realized, hey, you know what, my future is going to be in a little bit of the longer distances. So my coaches were kind of creative in how they used me in cross country. Um, I kind of, I think ran it maybe full-time junior year, ran it just sparingly senior year, maybe did some workouts when I was really young, freshman and sophomore year. So I feel fortunate that they kind of thought about my long term. So I didn't really dive into cross country until college.
Mhm.
And then track, like I said, very kind of systematically went through, running the 100 and 200 to mostly the 400, and then dabbling in the 800 once or twice as a junior, and then really focusing on that as a senior.
What did you like about the 400?
Oh, I just think it's such a beautiful combination of, sprints and having to kind of endure that lactic acid buildup the last 8 or 9 seconds, and you get your own lane. And if you run the 400, you get to be on the 4x4.
Yeah,
I just love it. I love it to this day. It's such a beautiful event.
that's cool. That's cool. Um, In high school, did you focus when you got to your senior year? Was the 800 your focus, or were you doing the 800 and the 1500?
Oh no, I never ran a 1500 in high school.
Okay.
Never ran the mile, nothing like that.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
oh, definitely not. I think maybe like I don't know, like a dual meet or something I ran it. And I honestly, Larry, I think I ran like 550.
Wow.
Um yeah, so it was the 800 was my focus.
Yeah.
And kind of looking back, there was some definite deficits in my training to really see what I could do because I did come from that sprint background and didn't really have much of an aerobic background at all. I remember having to run these 8 mile runs and literally like can't wrap my head around how far that was. But what we would do is run to this recreation center and hang out there for probably 20 or 25 minutes and run back. So
Yeah.
you're not really getting any kind of aerobic development
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
way.
That's most def.
So, I think it was more of an introduction to, hey, this is where you can make your mark in this sort of middle distance space. And I think I got better in the 800 in high school just by running it every weekend. I don't know that the training was super specific. But yeah, I ended up finishing second in the state of Virginia.
Wow.
Um, and I think ran 213 or 214 or something. So at that time it was okay. It wasn't great, but enough to show college coaches, hey, there's some potential here.
And
And
where did you
then,
go to,
splitting 56, 57 on the 4x4, I think coaches knew like maybe there's something here.
where did you go to college?
I went to James Madison University
Oh,
and
cool.
yeah, so honestly, that decision, it turned out to be the greatest decision, but at the time was just so incredibly naive and green. I didn't even know anything about college running, like literally nothing.
Uh-huh.
And most of my friends were going there. Honestly, that was sort of the motivation. I was recruited a little bit by SMU and I can't remember the other schools, but it was not a thought of where can I really become the best student and best athlete I can be. It was really like, hey, a lot of my friends are going here. This place is cool. Let's go. And,
Yeah.
after I did finish second in the state, the coach gave me a very small scholarship. And yeah, that's kind of how I ended up there.
What'd you major in college?
So I went to college thinking that I wanted to be kind of pre-law and go to law school. That was really fascinating to me. But very quickly, as I'm sure we'll get into, I'd say by end of sophomore year, I was very much had the coaching bug
Mhm.
and sort of started taking some more biology classes so that I could go on and get my master's in exercise physiology, which I did. So yeah, just kind of started getting that really, really insatiable curiosity about training and coaching halfway through college.
What was your college experience like in track and field?
Really interesting. I like I said, no real thought behind why JMU just went there, and
Yeah.
and it just so happened that the coach at that time was definitely more a sprint coach, but she had recruited this really pretty deep and talented middle distance class, my class, and was trying to kind of learn on the fly about coaching middle distance runners and having them adapt across country and all of that. And then she kind of realized, you know what, I'm a little bit out of my element here. And she asked the men's coach at that time if he would take us on. And that's Pat Henner, who's still coaching today.
Yeah.
And so he ended up coaching us, which was very fortuitous for me. That was awesome. And he was really great about explaining and educating us on, hey, here's the workout, here's why we're doing it. And that really appealed to me. And so sort of same thing as high school, started with the 800 and then I think Pat realized, you know what, I think maybe the 1500 is where she can make her mark and moved up, gradually, sort of same thing, senior year, sort of dialed in on that event. And, Larry, it's funny, like by today's standards, I don't know that I would have had a way to continue to run after college, but
Uh-huh.
I was just improving and I was just falling more in love with the sport and with the why behind the sport, and I was getting better. And I made NCAA's literally by the skin of my teeth on the last day, and then
Wow.
made the finals by the skin of my teeth. And I only ran 209 and 420 in college.
Hmm.
Um, but just it was such a great path for me to kind of really fall in love with how fast can I run.
Now, how did you go pro?
You won't believe me if I tell
I
you.
don't know.
So,
I'm bad because I remember seeing you. I knew you ran for Reebok, but I don't know how you got there. Yeah.
well, I didn't really go pro. Again, I just really loved it. That year I graduated was an Olympic year, and I
Yeah.
was fairly far away from qualifying for the trials, but I tried after NCAA's was over. I went to a few, those meets in Boston and tried to run, and I don't think I even PR'd, but I was so like excited about my development in the sport, and that I went to the Olympic trials to watch.
Wow.
And that was in New Orleans in 92.
92. Yeah.
And I can remember it to this day, sitting in the stands watching the women's 1500 final, and they were introducing the finalist. And I just was like, what am I doing? Like, I need a job. I was nothing like these women that were standing on the starting line, not even close. And a kind of for 90 seconds was like, this is what it takes. I'm not them.
Yeah.
And then the gun went off, and I was like, oh, wait a second, I can do that. Like, they're not doing anything that seems crazy to me.
Yeah.
And then really just knew I wanted to try. I wanted to keep running. And this is the funny part. I I wrote a handwritten letter to Mark Nenow at A6 because I was training in A6.
Oh,
And it
wow.
was literally like, Dear Mark, I love your shoes. I love running. I would love to keep running after college, something like that. And he set up a call, and he called Pat Henner's office, and I talked to him on the phone, and I was like, "Oh, did you run?" He's like, "Yeah, I ran." I'm like, "Oh, what event?" He's like, "The 10K." And I was like, "Oh, what was your best time?" And he told me, and I was like, "Oh, that's great." And I hung up the phone, and Pat was like, that was the American record
Record
holder in
holder.
the
Yeah.
10,000 meters. I was like, "Oh, that's nice." And then honestly, like a month later, I opened my front door and I had tons of boxes for A6 and from
Cool.
A6, and he basically felt sorry for me and gave me gear, and I think he paid for my hotel in Eugene at USA's, and
Wow.
so I qualified for USA's the next year, and then that year is when Frank Gagliano and Ron Helmer started the Reebok Enclave, and they were really close with Pat Henner, and they said, "Hey, we'd love to have Julie in this club," and that's how I kind of came to be in the Reebok Enclave.
So tell us about the Enclave because it is an incredibly unique um, um, place in the sport. And
At
Gags
that time,
is,
it certainly was. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
there wasn't really any kind of modeling for it.
Uh,
Maybe Athletics West, I don't know, but it basically was just if you know Gags and if you knew Ron Helmer, they were just genuinely passionate about the sport, and they had these tremendous athletes that were graduating and just going through that system, and they were all so good. Two collegiate Olympians and Steve Holman and John Troutman. And I think they just kind of looked around and said, where are they supposed to go? And they want to stay here. And how can we make that happen? And, just kind of had this brainchild about having this group when there weren't any groups. And
yeah.
they did such a beautiful job. And they just had, I don't know, I'm guessing like maybe 12 men and 8 women. Um, and we just sort of trained together. I was kind of the satellite member because I was still down at JMU about 90 minutes away. And so
Uh,
I'd come up maybe monthly. And,
mhm.
it's where I met my best friend to this day, Sherry Kana.
Oh, wow.
We trained together. Her daughter's my goddaughter. And it's funny, I don't even think then like the coaches thought like, oh, we have this middle distance runner that's more speed based and Sherry who's more distance based. They're going to be great together. And it just sort of happened organically. And then Gags brought um, Matt Centerwood Sr. To coach the longer distance guys. And it was just such a cool, thing and cool group that we had together. And again, I'm still super excited about my own running, but so passionate about coaching. And I had this front row seat to Gags.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. And So yeah, it was kind of one of the OG post-collegiate groups, maybe the only one in the 90s that I can remember.
Yeah.
Certainly that was more middle distance focused. And yeah, I was so fortunate to be a part of that.
What was the magic of Frank Gagliano?
What was the magic of him?
Yeah.
I think um, you knew that, and this is going to sound really simplistic, but it's not because I don't think it exists very much. He created a safe space to push limits because he's going to tell you these incredibly hard workouts and assign them to you and just, you are going to believe that you could do it because
Yeah.
of the way he said it. And it was going to be very safe to push yourself and fail because he was going to be there. But he was also going to tell you if you messed up. And he wasn't going to do it in a nice way, but he
Mm.
was going to do it in a way that was very educational. And
Yeah.
then 20 minutes later, he's going to put his arm around you and let you know it's safe here. It's okay. He didn't say
Yeah.
those words,
Yeah.
but that's what you felt as an athlete. And it was just a place where it was very, very, um, again, I keep going back to the word safe to really push yourself. Um, again, that sounds very simplistic, but the way that he created that environment is very unique. And you just felt seen, supported. I think he was a very individual coach, even if the workouts were the same for everybody. Everybody had their own instructions. Everybody was given, attention. And it was really unique how he managed that while coaching Georgetown. And it just showed me that you cannot pivot away from coaching the individual, even if it's in a group environment. He's the
Yeah.
one that taught me that.
That's cool. When did you know that you might have a shot at an Olympic team?
Um, that's a really good question. I knew that I wanted it, and I had little tastes along the way between when I graduated from college and the Olympic trial final in '96. Um, I had some races where it was like, okay, this is a worthwhile pursuit. This is not a pipe dream. You are now running times that, show people and yourself that this could happen. And then, I was so up and down in 1994 and 1995 with my performances. I would have, really kind of flashes of brilliance, and then my confidence would plummet.
Yeah.
And, kind of again fell into such a wonderful situation haphazardly, in that James Madison allowed me to really take my time with my master's degree to complement my running and not finish it in the 2 years that normally was required. And one of my assignments or one of my requirements was to have an independent study. And I wanted to look at sports psychology because it was really easy and convenient. And I could just go to the sports psychologist's office and chat with him that was next door to my coach's office, and it would be super convenient. And then after, kind of talking with him for a couple of times, he was finally like, listen, don't waste my time. Don't waste your time. If you're going to do this, let's do this. And it became, a mentor mentee situation. And he basically became my sports psychologist. And it was only through him that I really truly got to the place where I believed it could happen.
Mhm.
And he definitely is another person that changed my life forever, has molded my coaching philosophy. And through my work with him, through my training with Pat Henner, who continued to coach me, I just kind of built more and more confidence to the point where, it was never about going to Atlanta and finishing top three. It was more that, hey, I have a lot of body of work. I have a lot of evidence here. My brain had a lot of evidence that I can run with these people. And if I just control what I can control, I have a lot of evidence that says finishing top three is very likely if I make really good decisions. So I didn't go to Atlanta to the trial saying, oh, make the Olympic team, make the Olympic team. It was like, no, keep making these great decisions in the races, and it should happen based on what we know.
What was your sports psychologist's name?
Chalice McMillan.
Cool. Mike, to
Yeah,
give credit where credit's due. That's
he's
cool.
since passed away, but
Yeah.
his mentor was and his name's going to escape me, but he's really well known. I'll get it and send it to you. But
Cool.
his mentor was a man that went on to work with some of the best golfers in the world,
Wow.
and like really highly sought out, and people paid a fortune to work with him. And I was able to talk to him on the phone a couple times, and honestly, one of those men that when I hung up the phone with him, I was like, I can do anything in the sport that I want to do. He was that
Wow.
kind of man. So I was
Wow.
just so lucky. Perfect storm of people in my life to help me get to this goal. Because if you look on paper, like I said, 209 and 420 in college, that's not somebody who should make an Olympic team. So I was really lucky to just have a great team around me.
Well, your optimism, it explains a conversation I had with Nikki Hiltz, one of your athletes. They told me that working with you give them confidence. And that's what I've heard from the athletes who work with you too. And that really explains a lot. And it's always fascinating to see the backgrounds of athletes and kind of where they developed. Um, Tell us about the experience at the Olympic trials.
As an athlete,
Yeah,
it was it was kind of dramatic. So at that time, the 800, it was very similar to the schedule now. It's pretty drawn out.
yeah,
I know they're going to change it for 2028, but a long damn time. It was like 10 days long or 12 days
yeah,
long or
yeah.
something with the rest days, whatever. And at that time, the women's 800 was the first part and the women's 1500 was the second half. And Pat was like, I think it might really be something good to go run one round of the 800, and kind of then rest, recover, and get ready for the 15.
Yeah.
So we were kind of going back and forth on that, if we were going to do that or not. Um, and so we went down to Atlanta with that being a likely plan. And I can't remember at all why we pivoted. So I was down in Atlanta for what seemed like forever, watching all of this. And, unfortunately, I was down there with the Enclave and we were staying in this hotel. And the one thing that I really remember is every morning, when you're down there for so long, you're doing all these like short shakeout morning runs and then
Yeah.
these tune-up workouts, and it kind of gets old and monotonous. But every day I would come out of my hotel room, and Gags would never let us stay at the Meat Hotel. We had to stay some dive away so we didn't get caught up in all the lobby conversations. And so we're staying in this hotel, and I'd come out my room and go for my morning run, walk, and you'd walk straight down this corridor to outside, and the door opened up, and the first thing you saw was Georgia Tech, which also served as the Olympic Village. So
Wow.
every day, that was the first thing I saw was the Olympic Village right there. And it's kind of like, well, I'm either gonna spend some time in that village or I'm not. It's kind of this constant reminder of why we were there, even though you're trying to disassociate. But so I'm there forever with my teammates and was trying to find that balance of going to the stadium occasionally and kind of getting desensitized to that atmosphere, of course, supporting my teammates and then staying off my feet and resting and all of that. So I had seen a bunch of my teammates perform, and unfortunately, I can't remember how many, but we had a lot of athletes in our group finish fourth. So I'm watching all this and I'm
Wow.
like, oh gosh, this is a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I was just really confident, and I just, again, just held tight to that. Just keep doing what you're going to do and you're going to be happy with the outcome. And that was really sort of the mantra. And I think the biggest test of that came the morning of the semifinals. There had been something that went on in the first round, like a DQ, and somebody got reinstated. I can't remember, but at that time, I think they drew the semi heats based on how you did in the first round.
Hmm.
I think, and one of my teammates that was also in the 1500 knocked on my door, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, did you see?" I'm like, "See what?" And well, the semi heats came out, and all of the top like 8 people were in one heat.
Wow. Oh
And
God. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that ultimately got changed. But for about 4 or 5 hours, that's what we thought was happening. And
Wow.
I just remember everybody freaking out about it. And I was looking back, I think, this shows a lot just because of where I had come from confidence wise, but it didn't phase me one bit.
Uh-huh.
Not one bit. I was like, oh,
Uh-huh.
okay. Well, I have to race them anyway, so,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was really like, wow, that's so unlike me to not be rattled by this. And it just kind of showed me that, like, okay, I'm in the right place mentally.
Mm.
Um, and I remember maybe you do as well, but that last day they put everything in the middle of the day and it was in Atlanta and it was, I had a really good working relationship at that time with Dave Martin and he
Yeah.
was, doing all this testing with heat and humidity and everything. And he had called me and said, hey, I just want to let you know that yesterday during your race time today, it was 117 degrees on the track. I'm like,
Yep.
thanks, Dave. Thanks for telling me
Oh
that. But
my God.
it was just so hot that it was
Yeah.
kind of like it kind of dulled that nervousness because it's so hot.
Yeah.
And then they leave you out there on the starting line forever because of TV. And it was kind of like, all right, just shoot the gun. I want to just do this. And
Yeah.
I just felt really good about it. And then with 400 to go, I got really sort of trapped and wasn't in a great position. And people were kind of going around me and going around me. And I think with 300 to go, I might have been in like sixth or seventh. And I just stayed so calm and just got out of there and accelerated and was really trying hard to catch Regina and kind of missed out on her, but finished second. And I just was really, really calm. And I think I'm looking back very proud of that. But I
Yeah.
also know I worked really hard for that. And that was the reason I was able to make the team.
It was absolutely brutally hot in Atlanta. And of all
Yeah.
the Olympic trials I've been to since, God, 80, it's one of the ones that sticks out is just, I watched people, New Orleans was hot and humid, but Atlanta was just brutal.
It
And
was, and just because of TV and the time where people had to race.
oh,
I
yeah,
remember, wasn't it? I think it might have been Ed Eyestone that had gotten big heat distress and had problems and
Ed
was a
had a
lock
mess.
on the
Yeah.
team. And
Yep.
yeah,
Yep. It was very, very, I mean, that was heartbreaking to watch,
yeah,
and the, uh, you saw that happen in the tens, you saw that happen in the fives, you
yeah,
also saw that happen in the steeple. So it was just,
yeah.
um, what do you recall from your Olympic experience?
That one was a heartbreaker. After making the team and going through the TV stuff, I went to jog to do my victory lap and jogged over to my family and thought that one of the other women that was on the team was right behind me and had accidentally stepped on me. And I turned around, there's no one there. And that was actually my planner kind of tearing.
Oh man.
So yeah, I that track was really, really very hard on athletes' bodies.
Yep.
It was, millimeters of mondo over concrete in order to try to get Michael to run fast.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, we kind of paid the price. A lot of distance runners paid the price, including myself, and I suffered a pretty bad injury. And I have to say, USA Track and Field was amazing. I really wanted to give up my spot because I just couldn't train.
Yeah.
And they said, you've got such a bright future. We don't want you to, and we want you to come down ASAP and just get worked on. And I did, and they got me to the point where for maybe 2.5 minutes I could run pain free. But by the end of that first round, I was just trying not to limp, and it
Yeah.
didn't go well. But it was, of course, magical. And I was kind of hobbling through the village one day to go to breakfast, and a golf cart stopped to pick me up. And it was Muhammad Ali was in the cart, and he was
Wow.
getting driven somewhere to practice the torch or whatever. So I have a lot of cool stories like that. But in terms of performance, it wasn't good for me.
When did you decide, you always had a dream of coaching? How did you actually get involved in coaching?
So again, I was really fortunate, and when I was training right after college, that was back in the time when graduate assistants were really common.
Uh-huh.
And at James Madison, I was so lucky they didn't have a position for women, but the men's coach offered me the men's position just so that I could keep training and stay in my same environment. So JMU was awesome in that they let me kind of say, "Hey, you want to coach a little bit in the fall and then just full-time train in the winter and spring? That's great. Whatever you
Mhm.
want to do." So I was able to do that for a while, and then I relocated up to DC to, be up with the Enclave a little bit more. And Ron Helmer allowed me to go to some of the smaller meets with the Georgetown women as a volunteer assistant coach, and I got to do that. And
Cool.
then that just kind of segued into a full-time coaching job and sort of retiring from my own running at the same time. And I went right into coaching at Georgetown.
When did you retire from elite running?
Uh, right around, I got injured again at the right before the Olympic trials in 2000.
Okay.
So tried a little bit to come back, and it just I wasn't able to stay healthy, and just so probably somewhere right around 2001
Okay. And where did you coach next?
after Georgetown.
Hmm. Yes.
I went for a couple years at George Mason.
Okay.
That was interesting because that happened because I was being recruited to coach at Stanford.
Okay.
They were having some coaching changes, and Vin was leaving, and he was who was it that he who's the coach at University of Texas? He was going to be the
Oh, L'Oreal. Ed, as
yeah,
Edric?
Edric was going to be the coach at Stanford, and he was going to have the model of him being the director, a women's distance coach and men's. And so that was my dream. I always wanted to coach
Wow.
at Stanford and
Mhm.
was in a lot of conversation with him. And there was just something about it. I think it was mostly 95% the cost of living there and knowing that like this is going to be really, really hard to do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And at that time, that's when Andy Girard coached there. And he had those incredible Stanford cross country teams that scored like, I think the lowest points in history.
Yeah.
Um, and he called me and said, "Hey, listen, I'm coaching at Stanford now, but I just want to let you know that I was approached by the athletic director at George Mason, and they really want to put a ton of funding into reinvigorating that program from the days when John Cook was there and getting back to that level. And would you ever want to come and kind of help me? I mean, they're at the bottom of the barrel right now. They have nobody." And I thought kind of, that's so different. It was at Georgetown who had things going and we had,
Yeah.
trophies and we were doing so well. And then going to Stanford where they were already at the top of their game. And I was like, maybe staying where I am, staying in this area, Georgetown and George Mason are 12 miles apart and kind of really developing from the ground up, something and building and being part of that. So I worked with Andy for a few years at George Mason, which was so fun. He's to
Yeah.
this one of my really dear friends to this day, and that was great. And then for family reasons, we moved out to Colorado. And I really thought, I'm just going to coach pros now and kind of step away from college. And then the director of the program at Air Force called me and said, "Hey, in the middle of cross country season, our coach left, and would you consider coming down here?" And I was like, "No, I will not. Absolutely not." And he's like, "Well, just come down and look." And of course, if you've ever been there, that campus is incredible. And
Uh-huh.
I was still like, I don't think so. It's pretty far. It's like a 55-mile drive one way. And he's like, "Well, listen, just come meet the kids on the team." And so I did. And I'm like, done. I'm coaching here. These kids are
Wow.
awesome. Yeah.
How long did you coach at Air Force?
I believe 5 seasons.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And then that t same time too, with elite athletes, you were coaching Jenny Simpson for a bit?
Yep, I coached Jenny when I was there, and then throughout that time at Georgetown and George Mason, I had that Kevin Sullivan and Chris Lukezic and Sam Burley,
Oh, wow.
and so
Yeah.
when I moved to Colorado, Chris Lukezic came with, and
Yep. I
so I
remember
had
Chris.
some pros at that time, and then the Air Force had that WCAP program, so I was doing that a little bit. So yeah, that was really fun for me down there in Colorado. And I really really enjoy coaching at elevation. That's awesome. Obviously it's imperative. So yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, I remember Chris Lukasik a lot, and he was
Hmm.
good. And we corresponded a lot while he was running and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I got some nice notes from him after he retired too. So,
Yeah, that was really fun, and having him and Kevin Sullivan,
oh my
they're
gosh.
they're so far apart age-wise and
Yeah.
brought so many different strengths to the table in terms of training. And then Alan Webb would join our group very
Wow.
like at least once a week, probably twice a week. So that was people don't realize like Chris Lukezic ran 3:33.2.
Yeah.
as a junior in college. And if that would happen, even today with the shoes and the technology, that still would be a head-turning thing
Oh
today.
yeah. Yeah. It was
He was
huge.
so good, and just watching him and Alan and Sully work together was really, really cool.
What was it like working with Sully?
That was really interesting because, we sort of came up together as athletes,
Yeah.
and we both had the same manager, Mark Wetmore, and that's kind of how we got to know each other. I'd go over to Europe oftentimes by myself, and Sully would be over there. Sully's maybe, I don't know, 5 years younger than me, and he would come over with Ron Warhurst. So
Oh my
again, I
God.
got front row seat to another phenomenal coach,
Yep. Yep.
and I would just follow Ron around like a puppy dog at all those practices. And of course, got to know Sully as peers, really well, traveled with him all over the world. And then it got to the point where Sully at that time was married to a woman who wanted to coach and coach college. So they moved away from Ronnie to,
Yeah.
I believe, Illinois. And, Ronnie is one of the best coaches we've ever had in this country, but he just didn't like and didn't want to do remote coaching.
Yeah.
And so their relationship was really becoming hard to manage. And so Sully reached out to me and said, "Hey, this isn't. It's really hard for me and Ron. Not they're still great to this day. It wasn't a
Yeah.
personality thing at all. It
Sure.
was just the dynamics." And yeah, so I started working with Sully, and he had been sort of in a little bit of a slump.
Yeah.
Um, and then we were able to get him back down to 332 and make the Beijing team and all that. So that was really kind of an interesting dynamic because we had started as peers. And it was so great for me, and I just find that some of the happiest memories I've had in coaching.
Yeah, I've always admired Sully. I got to see him race a lot. I was there for all of his world champs and Olympics. I think he's one of the savviest racers I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And that I just remember an Adidas Oregon meet, pouring rain, cold, high 40s, and he dropped a 334. And I was just like, how does he do it?
Yeah.
And it was just always he's always fun, and
Yeah.
got to
Yeah, that
interview
was
him a couple
that's
of years ago, so that was in the whole coaching world.
that's awesome.
Let's talk about so after Air Force, you were at Air Force for about 5 years,
Yeah, 5 or 6 seasons, I can't remember.
and then where did you go after that?
So, my husband's brother, sadly had terminal cancer and was back on the East Coast.
Uh,
And his parents were really having a hard time getting him to and from his treatments and having to drive like thousands of miles. And, we just sort of had like a family conversation and said, we need to move back to the East Coast. So
okay,
that was kind of the last time I really coached college. We had one season at Albany. My husband's a football coach, so we coached at the University of Albany. And then literally the last game at Albany that one season, we were walking to the parking lot and we had a call from Penn, University of Pennsylvania, and Bob was offered the defensive coordinator job here.
wow.
So we moved down here. I coached 1 year at Penn. And then ever since then, I've just been coaching privately. And so, yeah, we've been in Philly since 2015.
So being married to a football coach, have you
Mhm.
learned things from the way he coaches that you
Yeah,
utilize? I'm fascinated
he's
with that.
Yeah, it's really, really fascinating, and it's really interesting. He's very, very invested in what I do. And if you were to talk to Sully, if you were to talk to Jenny Simpson, you talk
Yeah.
to Nikki, they will all talk your ear off about my husband.
Oh, that's
He's
cool.
their he's their biggest fan. He's so into it. He's got this a lot. He's a big personality, a lot.
That's
Very,
awesome.
very, yeah,
That
yeah, it's really fun.
that's
But to
really
see
cool.
the sport through his lens
Yeah.
has been really, really interesting. Because he's been in football and then he
Sure.
sees like, you know, what do you mean you guys meet in the middle of the woods for a practice? Like it's just so funny to like, for him to see kind of how it works. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's funny, he does see kind of some of the flaws in our sport too, from a different lens, you
Yeah.
know?
That's really
So that's
helpful, I think. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is, it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It's a nice dose of perspective for me. And then same, watching somebody coach a sport that's like not at all individual and
Yeah.
so dependent upon team. That's been really cool. But, I'd say the thing about him that he won't waver from is he's an educator first,
Yeah.
100%. So even to this day, every game plan revolves around something that happened on the day of the game in history. So they get this history lesson and then they try to
Wow.
apply it to the
That's
game plan.
cool.
So yeah, he's just very creative, very much an educator, and very much about the people. Um, there's coaches that will talk X's and O's and the all these things about football. He's just a people guy. He
That's
wants to
cool.
give people, first generation college students a chance at the Ivy League that might
Yeah.
not otherwise have a chance. Like he's more about that.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Now you are coaching individuals. Which athletes are you coaching now?
So I coach three athletes in Flagstaff, and that's Emma Gee, Nikki Hiltz, and Chrissy Gear.
Okay.
So I work with them. And then in the Boulder area, there's Maddie Borman, Colleen Quigley, Annie Rodenfels,
Yep.
Molly Shugro. So yeah, so that's the kind of core group I coach now. And then kind of late last year, a woman approached me about coaching, which I'm having a blast with. And that's Taryn Rawlings. She's a 1500-meter runner that made the finals this year at USA's and had a pretty big breakthrough.
Yep.
And she actually right now is overseas training.
Oh.
She's based in England.
Oh,
So
cool.
doing a lot remote, but once we get through this fall and the season start, I'll be heading to Flagstaff quite a bit. Oh, and I forgot my two Boston athletes, Heather McLean and Helen Schlottenhoffen.
Oh, nice.
So they come out to Flagstaff a lot. So when you
Uh-huh.
get the Helens, the Heathers, and the Nickies all together up at elevation, it reminds me of when Sully and Chris trained together. It's just these phenomenally talented athletes that are all a little bit different, but when they come together, the training is magic. Um, so yeah, I have a really nice group right now.
How do you manage coaching remotely? So do you talk to them every day? Do you give them a weekly training program? How does your method work?
Yeah, it kind of depends, and you meet the athletes where they are, and there are some
Sure.
athletes that want to, have conversations every single day.
Yeah.
Um, and there's, athletes that are like, hey, we'll talk to you after every workout day. But yeah, they know their training week to week. They have a calendar that's updated, usually on, Sunday mornings for the week coming up. And if they have questions, we'll talk it through. And certainly at minimum after workout days, we'll connect and talk about how that went. And it was one of those things over the last 18 months or so that I felt a pretty big insecurity about it. Like,
Hmm.
these athletes are trying to be the best in the world and I'm not there on a consistent basis, and that's hard, but it's really interesting that spending a lot more time with the athletes, not just the ones I coach, but athletes in general.
Yeah.
This year, especially on the Grand Slam circuit, when you have all this time in the dining halls to just chat, that I find like there isn't really a deficit besides being there to watch the workouts, which obviously is very important. Of
Sure.
course it is.
Yeah.
But I have found that some of these athletes are really craving more and more attention from their coaches that are there and
Yeah.
craving more individuality from their coaches that are there. And I'm learning that, yeah, I think the athletes would like it if I was there more, but they're very appreciative of the individuality that is non-negotiable for me. And
Sure.
the communication and the organization, I think is something I'm really proud of. And yeah, this year I plan to be in Flagstaff a lot more. So it's not perfect, and we're constantly tweaking things, but we've made it work pretty well.
Let's talk about your philosophy of coaching. Um, it's obvious that you take a lot of time to learn about the athlete and to consider their individual needs. Um, if you were talking to a group of young coaches, can you give us a couple tips into developing the philosophy of developing a program for high school athletes?
Yeah, and I was talking about this with somebody yesterday. Our high school coaches, I have the utmost respect for them, and you've been in Europe a ton. And I remember as an athlete, you go to the stadium the day before to do your shakeout and seeing these groups and groups and groups of kids and coaches just out there for hours working on the fundamentals and you learn that no, these are full-time coaches who have
Yeah.
been educated on coaching. And here it's like, hey, is there a math teacher that will please coach our track team?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so that when they volunteer to do that, I mean, that's not for the faint of heart. They're teaching all day, every day,
Mm.
most of the year.
Yep.
And then they're going to these track meets on the weekends, which are not 20 minutes long. They're 7 hours long,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I have a lot of respect for them. And I think for the most part, most of them are doing the very best they can and trying to learn, but there is no formal education, So I
Yeah.
think it's really, really hard for high school coaches. But I do think, something that they could do, whether they have time or they don't have time or they have training, is make sure that they're really committed to creating a really good chemistry and kind of like that gags dynamic, making these
Sure.
athletes feel safe and included and heard. You can do that even with a big group of athletes if you make that a priority. So I think developing that chemistry is really important with your team and making it a really positive culture.
Hmm.
It's got to start there. And then as much as you can, whether they're warming up or they're doing drills or they're stretching after practice or you're on the bus with them, whatever, take 3 or 4 minutes and talk to as many kids as you can and try to just get one nugget about what makes them excited. What do they want to do? What's exciting for them? And is your 19th person on your cross country roster going to get the same attention in high school as your number one runner? Probably not. But if you can give them that 3 or 4 minutes every other day or every three
Yeah.
days, they're going to remember you and you're going to shape their lives like, oh, I matter and this is worthwhile for me to see how fast I can run. So I
Mm.
think it has to start at that level by just creating that space for people to want to be there and come back the next day and get a little bit better and then I think, while you're explaining these workouts to these kids, take 30 seconds or 45 seconds to summarize why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? So they know, okay, you're not just out here making me run this weird threshold pace that you keep talking about that feels really slow. Why am I doing it? Explain to them.
Yeah.
They're smart kids. Like, let them know, why are you doing this? Why is this going to make me better? And kids really, really respond to that. And so do adults. They want to know, why are we doing this? Why do you care? Why do you want me to go through this? So I think all of those things are as important at the high school level
Hmm.
as the actual X's and O's of what you're doing and the actual workouts. Because if you can start with that culture, you're going to get these kids to buy in, and then you can really start diving into the fundamentals of and the science behind the training.
Do you have any suggestions for books or references for young coaches that you find are really important?
I think what would be more important to me than a book or references is pick
Sure.
up the phone and
Okay.
call a coach that you really admire, somebody that's consistently producing
Yeah.
athletes that are consistent, like instant message them on Instagram. Like these coaches are great people. They
Yeah.
will take time for you.
Yeah.
Or if it's a college coach that you really admire, make sure you're strategic. Don't email them this week, the week of cross country NCAA's, but people will respond to you and they will take time to mentor you. So I think that's more important than like a book or something because you
Yeah.
can talk to a person about real world experiences.
Yeah. No, I had Chaplin and Dellinger when I was a young coach in college, and I would go up to them meekly and ask them after the cross country coaches meetings. And Dellinger would talk to me and Chaplin, and those two together were like the biggest, greatest comedy team of all times. But
Yeah.
um, I was, I felt very lucky, to have a plethora of coaches out there. I want to talk with you about um, recovery because one of my observations, again, one of the worlds I deal with is a lot of high school coaches, and there's this American concept that if 1 mile is good, 2 miles are better. And I've been talking to athletes, a lot of the elite athletes, and one of the things they share with me is how they've learned that recovery is so important for them to get a benefit from a big workout. What would you tell a room full of of high schoolers who are enthusiastic about the sport, but really are trying to grasp the training concepts? What would you talk to them about recovery?
Well, one of the could probably be seen as controversial, but one of the things I talk about is, okay, if you're a casual observer of track and field and you pay attention to all the media surrounding the Olympic Games in track and field, inevitably, whether it's before the games or after the games, you're going to come across some media about some athlete in some country in some event, testing positive for performance enhancing drugs. And I
Yeah,
ask these kids, why would you do that? You're risking everything. You're risking your livelihood. You're risking your reputation. You're risking
yeah,
your coach's reputation. You're probably risking your health. Why would you do this? And the answer is, they're always like, oh, to run faster or to get stronger. The answer is no, that's not true. It's to recover faster.
yeah,
That's why, at the bottom level, that's why people will, cheat in the sport is to
yeah.
recover faster so
Oh,
they
yeah.
can go out and work harder sooner than you and I can.
Yes.
And if that is so important that these athletes are willing to risk everything to recover faster, why wouldn't we do everything that we can naturally and legally to recover?
Yeah.
And what are your two biggest performance enhancing drugs? You 80 high school kids right in front of me, and they are always, don't know what to say. Sleep and water.
Yeah.
Let's
Agreed.
start there. And so I
Agreed.
always kind of start the conversation with if people are doing this and risking everything, then what can we do, that's obviously ethical, legal, and, to recover and start with sleep and water, start with your schedule, start with time management so you don't have a random Thursday every other week where you're staying up studying for a test. Like let's start there. And then, when you have a hard workout, what is it, what do we think logically we should do the next day? We should, take our easy runs easy, listen to our body, not get
Yeah.
out there and be tempted. Well, I heard that high school in the other county, they run all their easy runs at 7 minute pace, so I need to do that. And the answer is no, is you need to listen to your own body
Yeah.
and your own training. And so, yeah, I'm a big proponent that, recovery is crucial and educating coaches and athletes on this is really, really important.
Yeah, I just recall from my own running, I did my hard days with a junior college, but I wouldn't go near them on the easy days because they would race too much on the easy days. And I knew that if I wanted to race well that weekend or 3 weekends from then, I had to take my easy days really easy.
Yeah.
And I just we was heard about a easy run that Josh Kerr did after a hard interval workout. He timed his assistant coach timed the recovery miles, and the first one was 13 and a half minutes. And it was
Mhm.
just like I cracked up. I said, but you know what? That's what he needed to do at that time. So
Yeah.
those are the things that are important. Um, what do you feel about tempo runs for high school athletes? How would you approach that?
I think it's really important to, constantly touch base with threshold work. I
Mhm.
think it's as we've learned and as the science has showed us and as training has evolved, we know that it's extremely imperative. And I think there's a lot of ways to get it in high school. And, I think probably the best way is to, have your threshold work done in chunks. That's probably the most efficient. If you send a group of high schoolers out for a 20-minute tempo run, is it really tempo for most of those people? Probably not. And
Yeah,
where do they find that? So I think, keeping it on the track and maybe running in the outside lanes or running the opposite direction and really teaching them where is that zone that is actually threshold work. And everyone's is going to be different. And, with Nikki, Helen, Heather, their threshold paces are not really the same. They're probably within 2 or 3 seconds of each other, but for each of them to get their true threshold,
sure.
sometimes they are spread out quite a bit, but they're getting the exact same value. out
Okay.
of the work. So I think that's probably the biggest thing is to at first with the young ones especially until they you establish the trust and they're very educated on what does it mean? What does this assignment today mean? What are we trying to do? I think it's teaching them and you do that by kind of breaking it up into segments with really short rest. So gags, love that lane 8 tempo where
Yeah.
you start a 400 at the stagger out in the outside lane where the 400 would start for a race,
Uh-huh.
running the 400, finishing at the finish line, and jogging really slow back up to that stagger as your recovery, and keeping that rest true and not walking it, but keeping it between 18 and 24 seconds and starting the next four and really staying in that threshold energy system because that's not enough time for your heart rate to drop back down and get out
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
range we want it in. But it's a good tool to teach athletes what is this threshold pace that we're looking for here.
One of the most popular events in high school is the 1500 or the mile or the six. I hate the 1600 thing, but that's my issue. 1500 or the mile. Okay. So we'll deal with that. What are the biggest mistakes high school kids make in trying to race the mile?
Um, that's a good question. I mean, I think yeah, we could talk about that for a long time. But in general, the younger kids probably are going out too fast.
Okay.
That's probably a safe blanket statement.
Yeah.
And not really learning, how this concept is actually pretty difficult to really learn, but learning that if you want to run 520 that the third 80-second 400 is going to feel more like 76. And the
Okay.
last 80-second 400 is going to feel like 72. And learning how do you put more energy in as you go to maintain a pace? How do
Mhm.
you do that? And I think teaching that in a really dramatic fashion in practice is the best way. So you're running a 600 and you run the first 400 in 85 and the last 237 and you're
Okay.
teaching those energy shifts
Yeah.
um, to sort of teach your body like, oh, I'm supposed to like put more energy in as I go. I think teaching that concept is really hard and it's hard for your brain to figure that out. But I think not really understanding that running even pace doesn't mean you go out in 80 and then you settle,
Yeah.
and that all of a sudden you're running 85s.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
learning that to maintain a pace, you have to kind of squeeze the energy and squeeze the effort, every 200 or 400.
Right now in cross country season, the high school kids, most of them are done with their state meets, so they're dreaming about the NXR, the Nike regionals. They've also got the Brook stuff coming up too. For these post-season events, what advice would you give them about racing in a post-season event in cross country?
I think one thing that's really interesting to go to these postseason meets, it's the first time for a lot of these kids to see these faces, right? Because you're
Right.
used to seeing, everybody in your own state or your own region, and then all of a sudden you're getting kids from all over. And that's number one, you're not familiar with the way a lot of these athletes race as you become familiar with your own, state or
Mhm.
region.
Yeah.
And number two, there's more density. And, maybe for you, maybe you were 16th at your state meet, and that translates putting all these other bodies in there to 45th at a Nike regional meet.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how do you do that? How do you and it's the same for transitioning to college too, right? Like
Yeah.
how do you going to NCAA's this weekend, how do you get excited about trying to finish 80th for your team? That's so hard. And
Yeah.
so I always tell these high school kids, like, you're not going to run a 5K. You're going to run 5 times a K. And you're going to stay so in the moment,
Yeah.
and you're not going to get overwhelmed by all these bodies around you because you've got every 3 minutes, you've got this micro goal. And I don't know what it is, but maybe it's okay. I am at the K. Okay, for this next K, I'm going to really close the gap between me and that girl in the white singlet. Okay, I did that. Now I'm with her. Okay, the next K. Now I've got another goal. And it just keeps you in the moment versus like, I don't know what place I'm in and I don't even know where I am on the course. Because oftentimes, even if you jog the course the day before, when you're out there surrounded by all these bodies that you've never seen before, you don't really know where you are. So I just tell kids, stay in the moment. Have little baby goals the entire way so that you're in the moment and you're competing from the beginning to the end. And you don't have 6 minutes in the middle where you're like, oh, what's happening? What place am I in? And you kind of fall asleep. You want to just stay in the moment, have all these little goals the entire way.
Julie, you have survived 1 hour with me. Um, Thank you very, very much.
I'll send you
Um,
a bill.
Oh, please, please. It was really enjoyable. This is Larry Eder with Run Blog Run. This is the Journey to Compete, a collaboration between Nike and Run Blog Run. We're with Juli Benson today. She's a Nike elite coach. She's a farmer Olympian, and she works with some of the finest milers in the world. Julie, thank you so much.
Thank you, Larry.